And we should be good to go. Okay. So thank you everyone for being here this evening. My name is Casey Miller, use she, her pronouns. I'm the Career Services Program Director for the College of Agriculture and Natural Resources. So basically, big picture, what that means is I help 18 our students figure out what they want to do, how to do it, and everything in between. Part of that is bringing in amazing professionals like the one that we have speaking this evening, which is Mr. Max Hames. And helping you all learn about opportunities out in the field and in the industry that you can then use to inform what your next steps may be. So this evening, I've got a list of questions that I'm going to be asking Max so that you all can just kind of get to learn about his role and what he does and a little bit of his background. And then towards the end of our time, I will open up a broad Q&A for anyone to ask questions. So Max, are you ready to get started?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Oh,
So my connection is actually getting kind of spotty.
Okay. Okay. Give us 1 second. We have a new Max on the call. I'm hoping that this is our Max. Okay. There we
Hi,
go.
sorry about that.
Oh, good.
Oh, that's on me for trying to use something that I haven't used in a very long time to do this. Set up in my wife's home office. She works from home. She does an excellent job working from home. But we were just talking about the fact that I am in manufacturing, and so I am headquartered at Sagamore Spirit. We're headquartered down in Baltimore Peninsula, and we are a hands-on manufacturing process making rye whiskey. So I missed if you asked a question or if you just wanted me to introduce myself,
That's
or
perfect.
however you'd like to start. Yeah.
No, that's
So.
perfect. So I'll ask a bit of a career review, right? You started with this, but can you share your current role, the title? You shared a little bit about who Sagamore is and everything. But can you talk a little bit about what distilling is and your line of work and kind of big picture, the type of work that you do?
Yeah. So, and sorry, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
All right, good. So at Sagamore Spirit, we make rye whiskey and exclusively rye whiskey up to about a week ago when we released a bourbon whiskey. But we are known as a rye whiskey company. To make rye whiskey, we are a value-added agriculture company. We take grain into our facility and we transform it, I think, in one of the most amazing ways and complete ways possible into distilled spirits. That process looks very much like a beer brewery up to a certain point, where we have water, grain, and yeast coming together into a mash. That mash is like a cooking process where we break down the grains into simpler parts. Basically, we're trying to break down long chain carbohydrates in the grain into simpler sugars, which yeast can consume. We do that with heat, liquid, and some exogenous enzymes. Once that cook is complete, we have kind of like a thick rye grain porridge, which we move over to a fermenter, where we'll add our yeast. Yeast will transform those simple sugars in that we release from the grain into alcohol and a host of other chemicals as well, until we have a fermentation completed at about 7.5% alcohol by volume. And then we, as a distillery, take that and we concentrate the alcohol and the other chemicals in that into our product. And our product is, at this point, distillate. It's a clear liquid that's about 135 proof off of our stills. We transfer that liquid into barrels and it ages, and we make rye whiskey by the barrel. Everything is about 6,500 gallons in the massing stage, and then we will fill like 14 to 15 barrels of whiskey out of all of that liquid. A barrel is about 53. It's exactly 53 gallons. I have been doing this for a long time, so I have been distilling in some form or another at 3 distilleries. Thank you for the proof note. That is a good note. And please chime in. I will see notes or comments or anything, or you can unmute and just ask a question if you want. I'm always happy to have these as more of a conversation than me just monologuing about what I think is interesting. So I've been doing this since 2012. I've worked at very, very, very small distilleries in a capacity of building the actual distilleries and the stills themselves. I worked at a distillery in Washington, D.C., which was slightly larger. Everything there was like a 500-gallon sort of system. That was my first experience getting to make whiskey, although whiskey has always been a product that I have been very interested in and wanted to get involved in. And then Sagamore Spirit, I've been with for 9 years. I'm the director of distilling operations. We have a team of 10 people. That team is responsible for handling all of those raw grains, bringing them into the building, getting that whiskey to the barreling stage. At that point, our packaging warehouse management team takes over. They'll get the whiskey into barrels, transfer it to aging barns where we have currently about 35,000 barrels in storage to turn into bottled products. Our team takes back over at the whiskey dumping and blending stage. So we do a lot of blending of the different mash bills that we cook and distill, blending of the different ages of whiskey that we have to make our different products. But that's the big picture of what we do.
Awesome. Thanks. So a little bit more into the specifics. So you mentioned that your title is the Director of Distilling Operations. Can you provide an overview of like what your day-to-day looks like? Are there busy seasons, slower seasons? What does a day in the life look like?
Yes. And can I ask one more time? Can you hear me? I was just trying to get my headphones reconnected. All right, good. So I've had every part of the job up to what I'm doing right now. So as the director of distilling operations, like we have our team distilling, cooking grains, making the whiskey on a daily basis and running the equipment. I have a blending and quality manager who works under me, who directs our laboratory and the blending operations, where we'll dump that whiskey and sort of blend it together to make our various products. And then I have a distilling operations manager who helps oversee the team of distillers. There are about 7 distillers under him. And so as all of those day-to-day activities are going on, my responsibility is like team management and personnel management. I think that's always the biggest thing that you can be doing as a team leader, is looking out for the needs of the people who work for you. Beyond that, it's a lot of inventory management. And I think of inventory as a barrel of whiskey. And so my responsibility is determining how much whiskey we are producing, keeping track of those efficiencies to make sure that nothing is going awry with our process. And then projecting out how much spirit we need to be making on a year-to-year basis, based on sales numbers that are projected out for a decade. With an aged product like whiskey, we have this really, really unique product where what you make today is not going to be on the market for quite some time. Our minimum age of whiskey that we use is 4 years old. So we need to know exactly what we're doing 4 years from now. So a lot of my job is that inventory management, both making sure that the whiskey is being made properly and that we're making the right amount of whiskey. But beyond that, a lot of it is allocating that inventory, those 35,000 barrels, to the different products that they need to be going to, and helping design our portfolio of releases that we have every year. Beyond that, strategic planning, there's also the liaising with all of our other departments. I think that distilling is super interesting, and that you don't have one facet of a company, but you have almost everything coming together focused on a product. You have a finance team, you have a marketing team, and a sales team. We're lucky to have a robust hospitality team at the distillery, as well as people who are doing hands-on manufacturing, HR, and everything. It takes so much to see the life cycle of a product, not just like as it's made, but into a consumer's hands, and then help them like experience that. Our oldest product that we've released, we actually just released it, so it's 10 years old.
Awesome. Very interesting. Okay, so I'm gonna steer us a little bit more into some of your background. So education in particular. Can you provide a little bit of background on your career and educational journey? Anything that stands out to you about skills, decisions, experiences that helped you get to where you are here?
Yeah, so this is a funny one to me because I think I have the most roundabout pathway into my career of a lot of people that you probably get. I graduated from college, and that's the maximum educational degree that I have, from Middlebury College in Vermont in 2007. And I had a degree in sociology and psychology with a minor in studio art. In 2007, the job market was not super robust, but at that point, I had a job fishing seasonally in Alaska. And so I was comfortable going up there for 3 to 4 months out of the year and then exploring my options for the rest of the year. I taught in a teaching program for a little bit from kindergarten to 8th grade. I did charter fishing in Hawaii for a year, and it took me about 5 years until I had the opportunity to get involved with a team of people who were working on a startup, and that startup was building a distillery. And when I got to that distillery, I found out it was not a distillery. It was an empty warehouse where we were constructing a distillery. And that means all of the equipment, all of the stills, and everything we were going to like research how to build these things, build them safely, and build them so that they can make a product. That product at the time for us was vodka. And it's kind of like a young person's ambition. We were really interested in making things. We weren't thinking enough about the product that was going to come out of those things and what the market for that looked like and what the end goal was. But I think our mission statement was like, we're gonna make vodka and sell it so that we can fund really cool things that we actually want to be doing. That distillery does not exist anymore. It was a lot of fun, and it got me into this. And I realized I could take that passion that I had for fishing at the time and handling a product and a natural resource that was really incredible. There were sockeye salmon that we're fishing for. They're beautiful fish. And I saw people working incredibly hard in this field and doing something that at the time was relatively young. The craft distilling movement in 2012 was the size of, I could name every distillery in the United States. I knew them all. Now there are over 2,500. I cannot keep track of what new interesting things people are doing, let alone what distilleries are doing them. That's a good question. I'll get to that. So I found a field where like people were working hard, we're making interesting products, and I stuck with it. But my knowledge around what we were doing really didn't start to evolve until I got involved with Sagamore Spirit, where we had a master distiller who worked at Midwest Grain Products. It was the Seagram's distillery in Indiana. It was one of the biggest distilleries making rye whiskey in the world. And I learned a lot by having that mentorship relationship with them. And that was 9 years ago. That was Larry Ebersold. He was just inducted into the Bourbon Hall of Fame. He is a really, really phenomenal person to look up if you're ever interested in people who are quietly defining the distilled spirits industry. Back to like my education set me up to be able to do almost whatever I wanted. Like at the college level, when you're studying sociology and psychology, it's not as much the subject matter that I was learning, but the foundation of learning itself and being able to write persuasively, being able to do research at the time where we did not have nearly as many on-hands resources as we do today, where we live in a much more connected online environment than we did. I remember JSTOR was like kind of a novel thing at the time. It was like, wow, we can really connect with other libraries around the country. And now it's like that's all online, and that's all available so handily. So learning how to learn is always kind of a silly way to put it, but like having that foundation of being able to put yourself into any situation and like learn how to do it was what I got out of my education. Uh, yeah, so long road, but I think just the flexibility to take the time to learn what I really wanted to do and could build a career out of was the best thing that got me here. Yeah.
Love that. Yeah, those transferable skills, I will say, that is not surprisingly the most circuitous path I've ever heard.
Good.
Which is why I love when we have all of our professionals come and they're like, yeah, my path was like this. Because that's the reality of work and like a professional career, right? Like so few of us are like A to B to C to D. So I very much appreciate that. And I like the focus on those transferable skills and how important and useful they were, even if your degree was not one-to-one like what you're doing now. But learning how to learn honestly is one of the most important things that you'll carry from college. Like I strongly believe that. So I do like that a lot. Um, so
I saw just a couple of
yeah,
questions which I can answer really quickly. As far as design of the distilling equipment, at the very first distillery I was at, where we were building what I would call nanoscale equipment, yes, I was involved in helping engineer the. We had a fractional reflux column, and we had to figure out how many theoretical plates we were going to be able to distill to, because we were trying to make vodka, which is distilled to a very high purity. Whiskey is a much rougher and less of what you would see in a lab. Like we're just trying to capture ethanol and so many of the flavorful compounds that make whiskey taste good. But to make vodka, yeah, we had to make sure that our very small still, which was built out of a stainless steel keg, could distill vodka to the azeotrope of what's theoretically possible at atmospheric pressure. So we were distilling 96.6 ABV spirit out of that. When I got to the next distillery I was at, we were purchasing distillation equipment from reputable manufacturers. That distillery used a Kota still. It's a German style pot column hybrid still. And currently at Sagamore, we're using a 40-foot Vendome copper and brass works beer still with two copper doublers. And it's almost like a standard product that they make at this point. Certainly when I got into distilling, there were no stills of that size around. At my second distillery, which I got to after 2 years, the 500-gallon pot column hybrid still was becoming more and more popular. And then 2 years after that, you started to see these, like, I would call them medium-sized distilleries, but they're like, Sagamore is a very large craft distillery in the scheme of things. Like we are 1/20th the size of what Jack Daniel's is, but we're also 30 times the size of what a typical craft distillery is. So it's somewhere in the middle. So there's less engineering. We're getting engineers to sign off on all of the like specifications of the stills. People get into distilling through careers in beer brewing, but mostly it is just a passion for spirits and an eagerness and willingness to learn the craft. There are a lot of bad habits that you can form in the industry. There's not like a common shared best practice for making whiskey. There are lots of different theories and feelings about how to make a spirit when you have the blending of the science of fermentation and distillation meeting the art of tasting whiskey and deciding what makes it good, and then trying to interpret what choices in the scientific part of fermenting, mashing, fermenting, and distilling led to those flavors. So you have a lot of interesting theories. This is one reason that it was really good to learn from somebody like Larry Ebersole, because he could easily quash a lot of those in his 40-year career. He had seen most of everything. And then the last question I saw was, yes, that is exactly why people start with clear spirits. The aging process, you can do a lot of things to try to speed up the aging process, but you really can't cheat time when it comes to making brown spirits. Whiskey takes uh, just just time to mature, and there are lots of entrepreneurs trying to figure out how to make that go faster. Because if you could make a barrel of whiskey taste like it was 8 years old in 2 years, like you would unlock something really advantageous for yourself in the industry. But nobody can do that because there are interesting things that happen in a barrel, and you can't quite replicate just what happens with time. But yeah, those hopefully answer some of those questions.
That was awesome. Keep them coming, everybody. I'll keep going with mine until we have more. Oh, there we go, right there.
Yeah, no, I love that question because a lot of what I wanted to do and have gotten to do at Sagamore is with our grain program. So when we started out, we set out to be a Maryland style rye whiskey, and we were sourcing and still do source grain from a large broker in uh, Kentucky, Consolidated Grain and Barge. They're like a Fortune 500 company. Within that company is a subsidiary called Brooks Grain, and they supply corn, rye, and other raw grains. I say raw meaning unmalted grains to distilleries like Midwest Grain Products or Jack Daniels or anybody using them. They're very consistent. They're very high quality. They source their grain from all over the United States and Canada. And at various times in history, they were sourcing their grains from all over the world. Um, but we're a Maryland style rye whiskey. To us, that means sourcing. And the responsible thing to do when you're sourcing raw ingredients by the truckload is to try to find a source close to home. So no rye was being grown in Maryland for harvest when we set out. And the last kind of look into that had started and kind of ended with the retirement of a gentleman who worked at the University of Maryland Extension Office in Howard County. And I cannot remember his name right now. I wish I could, but he was doing research into best practices for growing rye for harvest. All the rye that was being grown in Maryland was typically for cover cropping purposes. So we found farmers who wanted to break out of the corn and soybean cycle, and were looking for something that could complement, it's pretty analogous to a winter wheat crop. A lot of mills are closing around here where you could sell wheat off. So it's very beneficial to have a customer of a decent size to start using rye, which is a very hardy and like excellent crop all around. I love it. So long story short, we reached out to the University of Maryland Extension Office, found somebody who's working with farmers to do small grain research. They got us in touch with people who were growing rye, hoping for a customer. I think they probably saw Sagamore was using rye whiskey, and they're like, maybe we can do something here. They were growing rye for a malt house that didn't quite work out, and through that connection, we have grown our Maryland rye program to grow about 250 acres of rye a year, netting us like I got to think in not bushels. It's like 1.1 to 1.6 million pounds of rye, which would comprise maybe 25 up to 35% of our total rye usage for a year. Developing that into a really high quality product has taken a lot of trial and error with our farmers, because you get one shot every year to make decisions on it, on what you're doing with your crop to make sure that you're getting the highest quality grain possible for distilling out at the end. And we had issues with like using storicide on rye, which is not but it's a out of date insect preventative thing, insecticide. Thank you. So we had issues with that. We've had issues like in 2018 when you had 30 inches of rain the month before harvest with Fusarium head blight in our rye. We've developed a fungicide program to help mitigate that. And then we also like know that we have to use the correct crop rotation to get a quality of rye that's up to distilling standards. So there've been all of these things and all of these tweaks, and in the end, we are able to grow a very high quality of rye. Where I talk to the the broker from Brooks Grain, and he'll be like, I heard that the crop in Pennsylvania was terrible, and I'll show him our quality numbers for dawn levels, moisture. We measure rye by its plumpness or how much thin rye you have, and he'll be like, okay, that's much better than I'm seeing in the region. We do lose the opportunity to blend rye from our region with rye from everywhere else, but it's incredibly important, and it's the reason that I can go out and say we're making Maryland style rye whiskey and feel authentic about it and using as much Maryland grain as we possibly can. We're not putting all of our eggs in one basket and trying to use exclusively Maryland grain, but we're making a very sincere effort to do a good amount.
That makes sense. Thanks for the extension call out too.
Absolutely. Still work with them.
So in kind of a similar vein, what resources did you utilize to become proficient in distilling? And I guess simultaneously, do you have recommendations for any students looking to get into it? Additional skill sets, certifications, trainings, anything that you would recommend?
Yeah, at the time I started, there was not a lot. It was a nascent industry, and I looked to the beer brewing industry and saw what craft beer was doing at the time, because craft beer is 30 years ahead of the craft distilling industry with all of its ups and downs. We're seeing them in the same kind of cycle, but craft brewing just took off much earlier, and I think a large part of it is like it was legal to brew beer at home for a long time. It is not legal to distill spirits at home. It is not something that you're introduced to in high school or anything. This is a great industry, but it's really hard to open people's eyes to what it is and why it's worth exploring and getting into. So at the time I started, craft brewing had trade organizations and conferences and things where they were sharing knowledge, and distilling had not a lot of that. We have two major trade organizations now, the American Distilling Institute and the American Craft Spirits Association. Attending conferences, going to talks, listening to people speak to their expertise has been a great resource for me, and you can learn a lot, not just about the distilling process, but about running a small business and a distilled spirits business at that. We make rye whiskey, but there are hundreds of styles of spirits made all around the world, and a lot of them are rooted in really interesting traditions, and a lot of them are brand new. And so people are always trying to find that niche that works for them and speak to the consumer in a way that's telling them that like what I am making is special. It's really hard, and it's great to hear people talk about where they found success or where they have not. So trade organizations are great, and what a lot of them have are also ways to recruit people into the industry. We're always trying to get more diversity into our industry. It is an important cause at Sagamore. So we work with the American Craft Spirits Association with their Step Up internship program, and that's been a great like resource to look into for some people. We've hosted interns through it. I think that like going to a distillery, you will find a lot of very open and welcoming people. And if you want to see the scale and size of distilleries, almost every distillery does a tour. Craft breweries do tours too, and just to be able to look at the equipment and look at the actual manufacturing facility, like that's the job site. Like you need to know what you're getting into. We have a lab that is just a room with some very rudimentary lab equipment, and it's more advanced than a lot of other distilleries will even have access to. But like there's that side of it, and then the actual brewing and distilling side. There are those resources through trade organizations, but there's also an educational background to it. Obviously, I didn't have that, and it hasn't inhibited my path into this too much because I've been able to learn as I go. But if I had studied chemical engineering, biosciences, or something that if I had studied business administration, I might own a craft distillery right now instead of working at one. But I am thankful that I just work at one because it's a lot of benefits to just being able to hang your hat up and go home at the end of the day. Leave all the stress of work at work. So two sides of that. But yeah, there are a lot of resources now that have been developed over the last 10 years that weren't available to me when I started out. So I had to do a lot of just research. Like you're trying to take technologies that might not have been adapted to distilling and apply them to what you're trying to do. We at the very first distillery that I was working at were trying to be as non-traditional as possible, and really like to a fault. But we were taking yeast and like making sodium alginate, like almost molecular gastronomy food balls, and then impregnating them with yeast and making a continuous bioreactor for a fermenter rather than using a tanked fermenter. We were building our own stripping stills at a size that like nobody would have, because that's it was cool. We wanted to do it, and those things didn't exist in distilling, so you had to go and find out where they're being used and try to apply them to what we're doing. The second distillery that was much more traditional. And I think you find at Sagamore Spirit a blending of that traditional and that new kind of innovation. And so keeping up with current technology is also super important. And that's another place that trade organizations, trade shows can come into play. So I learned a lot through the American Distilling Institute and through the American Craft Spirits Institute. And most of all, just by doing my own research, and then to a large degree also like working with people who are like-minded. I think it's hard to learn when you're on a very small team, but we have a decently sized team, and we've had some great mentors at Sagamore Spirit to learn from as well. So yeah, it's difficult. That's all I'll say. It's not like starting at Sagamore when the distillery wasn't even built. We had a like clear path forward to this is how you make rye whiskey. It was very much like, okay, we're building a distillery. You're going to operate it with a small team. We had 3 people on the distilling team when I started. How are you going to make the best rye whiskey possible? And we tried to figure that out.
Yeah. Sounds like a lot of building the plane as it's flying and trial and error and figuring it out.
Very much.
Yeah, yeah. Don't exactly have a LinkedIn learning course on how to distill. So well, I take that back. They might now. But yeah, I think that's some really good advice, right? Like this is not something that you can do without actually doing it. You need to learn in the hands-on space. So, oh, perfect. Looks like we have a question.
Yeah, I saw that one pop up.
Okay.
I have not taken any complete formal chemistry courses since college, and it certainly did not get me to the point where I was learning about what we're currently doing at Sagamore Spirit. So very much have had to do research when I find a gap in my own knowledge, whether that be like understanding yeast metabolism and like exactly what compounds yeast are breaking down into what flavor esters. That's something that I would try to pick up piece by piece. Thankfully, like it is a process which is very understood. Like we are not you're going to run into like major problem categories in brewing and distilling, and it's usually related to like a bacterial infection somewhere, which you're using sensory really to pick up issues as they arise, and then just using troubleshooting and more of a mechanical troubleshooting process to track down where those issues are coming from. So it's less of a chemistry error, and a large benefit from that is like we're using a standard yeast stock that's manufactured for us and delivered to us and kept to quality standards by that vendor. So we don't have any like contamination from using non-traditional yeast. But yeah, all of this is to say like the gaps in my knowledge I've had to seek out and fill on my own. And it has not been a problem. I have biochemists who work on my team. I have molecular biologists who work on my team, and they also contribute. some of those, but it's not a day-to-day thing where you're trying to like run a GC analysis on your whiskey and try to tweak things based on that. A bigger part of what we do, because we're making a product for people to drink, is we drink it and we taste it, and we use sensory tools to measure what we're making. And that is, again, where we're not like trying to make decisions based on how we feel about a product, but we're trying to take enough data on what people taste in a product to be able to understand exactly what that product is to a range of different palates. So that is a bigger tool than breaking down the chemical that we make whiskey, ethanol, and all of the congeners in that ethanol, and trying to like understand it at that level. If, again, rambling, but if that makes some sense.
It does to me. I think it makes a ton of sense. So let me see. Next question that I have for you. Oh, here we go. Could you explain more about the process of sensory evaluation on spirits? Great question.
Yeah, we so built our sensory program from the ground up, and have had like several people run it over the years and contribute to it. So it's very bespoke to Sagamore Spirit. But what we do is we have a standardized sensory experience, and we have a core team of trained sensory panelists who like taste, smell, and otherwise evaluate whiskey at different stages of the product development process. We taste at the distillate stage. We taste, that's unaged whiskey. We taste at a 3-year aging mark. So before we've turned it into or decided what product it's going to be turned into. And then we'll taste at a finished product, or kind of like R&D stage if we're making something new. Our team is looking for faults in whiskey, and we have reference samples to what faulted whiskey tastes like. Common faults in whiskey are going to be from acetaldehydes, and they're going to come from musty grain in your whiskey. And it's kind of a curse, because you start to learn what these taste like, and then you go and taste them in other people's whiskeys, and you're like, oh no. It kind of ruins whiskey sometimes, but it's okay, because it's also very interesting to train a palate to be able to pick up those things. So we look for faults, we look for off flavors. There's like a buttery diacetyl flavor that you can get. It tastes like buttered popcorn. It's very interesting. There's earthy notes. We categorize all of these faults into different areas, but we also categorize the core of what rye whiskey should taste like. And then we'll have people score them from 0 to 7. Our sensory team is about 8 people, and we'll try to get to getting like 6 people to do each individual sample. And then we'll aggregate all of those scores and start to look at trends. So if we do enough samples, if we test every batch of distillate at the distillate stage with the same sensory panel, we can see if like we're dropping off on a fruity aspect to our whiskey, and that can be an influence of fermentation. So maybe our fermentation temperatures have been altered. Consistency is really what we strive for all the time, though, and I think just like keeping to a super consistent product, you don't have to worry as much about those faulted off notes. Something like methanol is not made through what we do, which is a very clean fermentation. We try to run our fermentations and get them distilled as soon as they're completed. And then you're only going to really make methanol with different stock ingredients than rye and corn. And then we will also send it out to a laboratory when needed. So occasionally we'll test for methanol. A bigger issue in the distilling spirits industry is ethyl carbamate, which comes from like running your condensers on a still incorrectly. And like Canada, for example, has levels of ethyl carbamate that you need to be under in order to, when we used to be able to export spirits to Canada, they would have us test them. But Methanol should not be detectable in whiskey unless you're doing something like pretty dramatically wrong. But just never, we've tested for it. We've never had an issue with it.
Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I could talk more about sensor. I could talk more about everything, but again, I'm trying to keep it short, and then I'm like, I got to wrap this up. So, I love and appreciate the questions. So.
Okay. I'm gonna ask another one. I'm waiting to see if anybody's typing. I'm gonna ask another one now, and then after that, like, let's fully open it up. Any questions? So, future trends. Where do you see the future of work within distilling, big, small operations? What advice would you give to individuals looking to enter into this field?
Yeah, I would say if you're looking to get into distilled spirits, like find out what engages you with work and make sure that's something you find in an aspect of the distilled spirits industry. I have a passion for product creation. I know that. I have recognized it in myself for a long time, and I like being able to take raw materials and transform them into a finished product and work with a team of people who are all working towards that goal to be able to hand somebody a bottle of whiskey and say, hey, like, I was involved in making this and I want to share it with you. And it's nice that whiskey is a value, I'm sorry, a luxury item. It's got a very high perceived value. I always like to joke that it's just old corn in a bottle. It shouldn't be that precious, but there's a lot of mystique to it. So it's kind of fun. You quickly kind of like the veil is dropped very quickly after working in the industry with all of the marketing schemes that people have. But like find out what engages you with work. If it is being able to do research, if it's connecting with people, like there's a marketing aspect or a sales aspect to whiskey. If it is manufacturing a product, very much we have that. For future trends in the industry, like it's been a roller coaster since I started. I always like to say we haven't had a normal year at Sagamore Spirit since we started distilling in 2017. Like 2017, we got the distillery up and running. In 2018, we kind of worked out the kinks of it. In 2019, we had a roller coaster year trying to build up our production to what we thought we would need to be doing. In 2020, we made hand sanitizer for
Yeah. Mhm.
45 batches of 99% corn, 1% malted barley hand sanitizer with a formula developed with Johns Hopkins. It was very, very interesting, and we'll never do that again. And then like you see larger trends in drinking that affect all of us and are like getting into the news where people are drinking differently, they're drinking less, they're spending their money differently. Whiskey in 2010 was like a brand new thing, basically. Like people basically forgot about whiskey through the 1980s, 90s, and 2000s. And like I wasn't, drinking before 2005 or something. I forget how old am I. 2006. So I was very interested in whiskey but I didn't know anything about it. And I think a lot of people like me were like, hey, this is a pretty phenomenal spirit that has a lot of flavor. Whereas before that, people wanted to drink things that did not have a lot of flavor. Vodka was a very popular spirit. It still is, but it was the most popular thing. And in a response to that, our industry made light whiskey. They tried to make whiskey as flavorless as possible and distilled it to a very high proof, and they made a totally different product. So it's interesting to see like all of the trends come and go over the years. But I think what will continue is a connection to the people who make a product. And I think that will grow stronger. People want to know, they want traceability to the products that they're drinking. They want to know like where the raw ingredients came from. I think this is my hope that people want to do this because we work so hard in like Howard County and Carroll County and Baltimore County to grow this grain. And they want to know that the companies that they're supporting are supporting the communities around them. So like we try to do all of that at Sagamore to some degree, but like I think that like the authenticity that you try to bring is super important. I don't think that Sagamore has always been the best at being an authentic company, because like we're trying to put a elevator pitch out there, and sometimes the details get a little lost. Where like we started out with sourced rye whiskey from a large distillery, and on our bottles it would say distilled in Indiana, and we used that whiskey for years before we had Maryland distilled whiskey in our bottles. But we started out being like, well, we don't want to like change our marketing profile, our shelf profile in the middle of that switch. So we started doing that. I was like, okay, some people are going to get upset when they realize that it's not all made in Baltimore, but that's something you can always try for. I think that like whiskey will always be there. It'll come, it'll go. I think that the price of whiskey, if you follow whiskey clubs or trends, like people are paying really outrageous amounts of money for some bottles of whiskey, and it is just old corn. So I think people are also going to be looking for a value with a high quality product that's affordable, that they can drink and share, and not feel like they're like yeah, they really are. Not feel like they're getting ripped off. So we've always tried to be a premium to super premium brand. Like we're not cutting any corners in our process, and we are a relatively small distillery. We lose some efficiency at our scale, but at the same time, we're not trying to charge like $250 for a bottle of whiskey. That is more than what people can, go out and afford.
Mhm.
So I think that like more people will push back against that. I think prices will come down. I think it'll be a better market for a consumer, that will hopefully bring more people back into. Yeah, beer is super expensive too. All of our raw material prices are going up, but like you've got to find some balance to it. And when things get more affordable, more people can enjoy it, and that should kind of help the industry. I think like a lot of news stories say like, oh, Gen Z isn't drinking like they used to, and I'm like, yeah, couldn't afford to. So what are you gonna do?
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that organic and other types of trends in food should hit spirits at some point. It is incredibly difficult to pull together organic grain from Maryland and not be charging like exorbitant amounts of money for the product that you're putting out in the end. But that is another thing. Yeah, I could go on, and I'm just talking about whiskey. If you want to talk about gin or like tequila, which I try to not learn anything about tequila because we can't make tequila in Maryland, so I'm not worried about it. Or brandies or anything else. Like there's a world of opportunity to all of that as well. But yeah, I don't know. Basically, that's
Awesome.
that's the 7-year plan. We're making the whiskey for uh we're making the whiskey for the people 7 years from now, and hopefully making exactly what they're interested in.
Yep. Okay. I'm going to open it up if anybody has any more questions. If not, I do have another one, but I want to give people a minute. Okay, so let me ask, looking back on your own career path and entry into this field, what, if anything, would you have done differently?
Yeah, I did read through your questions before this, and I was like, wow, what a journey. So it's really hard to say. I think like, well, we do get our barrels to breweries to use for barrel aged beer whenever we can, and we try to get those barrels back sometimes to age whiskey in after that's had some beer rest in it. The barrel economy is really fun and interesting. I So well, the first distillery that I worked at, I was a founder of that distillery. I thought it was going to be like a company that I would, help start and run, and like we would grow it into something really interesting and cool. And it gave me the benefit of learning a lot about the industry and realizing it was something I wanted to do, just not with that group of people and that framework. I like can't think of where I'm also very lucky in that I started doing this 10 years ago, like 12 years ago, when the industry was so young. I had a ramp to learn all of these things as I went, and got to the point where I felt like I feel confident in what I'm doing now, to a degree, but not totally confident. I think that like I would have invested in education at an earlier stage in my career if I knew that there was growth opportunity in it. So when I was starting out distilling, it was a nano distillery. Like it fell apart. I felt like I moved to Washington, D.C. to be with my wife got a job there, and so we moved down there. And I just heard a distillery that was opening up, and I was still fishing at the time, so I was like, oh well, maybe I'll see if they're hiring. And I knocked on the door before they'd had their grand opening, and like submitted they basically were like, go away. Like you can't just knock on a company's door and
How dare
give
you?
us a resume. I was like, yes, you can. That's how it should work. But I don't think that I recognized that this was like a viable career path at that time,
Mhm.
because it felt like such a small trend. It wasn't. It was growing, and there are lots and lots of signs that this was a growing phenomenon and that people were interested in. I remember the opening, the grand opening of that distillery in Washington, D.C. And I was just like, what are all of these people doing here? Like there were hundreds of people who were very excited to come down and see a new craft distillery get its doors open. And that should have been a clue that like this has legs. Like this is something that you can really get into and invest in. But invest in yourself. Like if you are truly happy and you're doing something that like you found that's fun, it's engaging to you, it's hitting those things that keep you engaged. I think I could have invested in myself and tried to learn what the fundamental skills were that I was lacking earlier, rather than trying to pick them up as I go.
Mhm.
Always excited for the new distilleries opening in Maryland. Song Dog Distilling in Montgomery County is opening up, I think, this weekend. They have their grand opening, and they're making some great stuff. So if you want to see the grand opening of a distillery, Song Dog is right around the corner.
Awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, I know the potaches at Trippy Goat. I haven't heard of butterfly, so I'll have to look that one up. But
Very
yeah, I don't
exciting.
I don't have any I don't have any real regrets. Good. I do feel like I'm very lucky to have to do this for much longer than I thought was possible.
Yeah, that's nice. It's nice to hear that, it may feel like either niche or unconventional or whatever hesitations are out there, but like it is a genuine, real career with a career path, and you can learn and love it and have success in this space. So thank you for that. We have just like a couple minutes more. So if anybody has any last burning questions, this is your opportunity now. So I'll give you like a minute, but if not, I will stop the recording.